Welcome to the Religious Nut and Hellbound Center podcast. I sound like an announcer, don't I? Anyway, my name is Brother James.
And I'm Chris, XRYS.
And we are friends, and
very good.
One of us, yes, I'm the Religious Nut friend.
And I'm the poor Hellbound sinner.
So this is our first podcast, and we don't know what we're going to be doing because we've never done a podcast before. So we hope you'll enjoy it. Yes. Anyway.
You guys are lucky.
Oh, yeah. I am a very conservative Christian who's actually looking at going into the ministry. And you are?
I am a progressive, liberal, non-religious, and a million other adjectives describe me, but I'll leave it at that for now.
We'll get in that at least a little bit into the longer section of who we are. But, yeah, we're looking at doing a podcast. See, we come from two similar backgrounds, but we diverged somewhere.
Very different paths we followed.
Very different paths, yes. I chose the less traveled. Anyway.
Well, I mean, depends on the stats you're on.
I was
using Christians and atheists, you know.
Yeah, true. But hey, I'm not your typical conservative Christian. You know that. Right.
I'm still in denial.
Right. I am not your typical conservative. Okay, I didn't vote for Trump.
I'm kidding.
I did not vote for Trump. And we'll get more into politics.
Yes, I know. That would have been hard to forgive you for.
Yes, it would have been hard for me to give myself also. So, Kingy, how did we meet? By the way, we're going to call each other Kingy. I hope it doesn't get too confusing.
It's kind of a thing we do.
And we will explain it.
Because we each secretly want to rule the world.
Oh, yeah. Well, secretly, not anymore.
Anyway. I'm Pinky, he's the brain.
I'm the brain?
You're the brain.
I'll take that. Anyway, so how do we meet?
We met under a starlit sky on a February evening. No, wait, that's tonight. Here we meet again. We met at a conservative fundamentalist Christian college in our freshman and sophomore years. We shared together. I believe we took a tennis class together.
Oh, yes, we did. Talked about girl problems, primarily.
Oops.
Yes. And so we, at the time, where was I heading? Where were you heading towards? I
was a ministerial major.
Okay.
Not like the ministry you're going into, but a very different one.
Oh, we'll get into that, yes.
Yeah, we'll get into that later. But yes, that's what I started out as. My dad was a pastor, and yeah, kind of followed that track for a while. And what were you doing? I forget.
Well, I was running as far away from any sort of ministry thing as possible. My dad was a pastor as well. Good old independent fundamental Baptist pastor, and that's not what I wanted. So when I went to the fundamentalist college that we met at, I was looking at going into law. So, yeah, and I wanted to be a politician. Anyway, so we met...
I don't think I knew that.
You didn't know that, Kingy? You didn't know I wanted to be a politician?
I thought it was... I think that you had the law thing going on, but I thought it was computer science.
Computer science? Me?
Evidently, we forget things about each other sometimes.
You don't know me, Kingy. Why are we even doing this podcast now?
Because of puppets.
Puppets, yes.
We bonded over puppets.
That's where the real... we started a bit of the bonding on a different level with the tennis, but
yes.
There was a puppet ministry. And I guess we can talk a little bit of why... Okay, we'll talk about why we call each other Kingy. So, Kingy, why do we call each other Kingy?
Because in these puppet skits we would do, we selected stories from the Bible for the kids that always had a king and a servant in them, whether it was Nebuchadnezzar, Darius, Saul, whoever.
David, whoever, yeah.
Right.
Solomon.
Right. And so there was this Ernie puppet that was made up to look almost like a Spanish conquistador. And this big, furry, green, bug-eyed puppet, and we named him Spearmint. He had this shirt on saying World Hero, and...
World Oreo.
It was definitely World Oreo.
Yes.
Definitely. And so about half these skits would be the king and the servant Like, basically, the servant was supposed to be the stupid one, but really he held the kingdom together.
Kind of like Pinky in the Brain.
Exactly. So, yeah, most of the time I was spearmint and he was the king, but somehow, once in a while, we'd switch roles, so somehow we just... Kingy rolls off your tongue better, I guess.
Yeah. Spearmint or servant just doesn't go as well as kingy.
See?
So, you can do the voice so much better of servant, so do it.
King! Have you seen the sun today? I looked at it for 5 hours.
What do you want, servant?
Well, Kingy, the sun. I just had this spiritual epiphany when I was looking at it.
That's called blindness.
Oh, that's why I can't see you right now.
Anyway, so the kids loved it. They absolutely loved it. Now, who didn't like it were, I almost named him. You know who I'm talking about, the evil one who shall not be named, the Mormon.
Oh, yes. That's one.
He wasn't really a Mormon, but...
we gave him a hard time about it,
though. Anyway, actually, I think I tried to friend him a few years ago. I don't know. We might be friends, he and I. Anyway.
But he couldn't get you out of the friend zone.
Kingy. I don't even want to talk about that. Anyway, we cannot talk about this person in depth because people might know who it is.
Yes, if we say too much, yes.
Okay. So we left from those schools. I forgot, you didn't graduate from there?
Oh, no. I wanted to leave after the first year. My dad kind of made me stay the second year, and then...
Because I was there.
That's the real reason, yeah.
Yeah. So we both decided to go to different schools. I did a bit of community college, and then I finished my degree at a university inside of Tennessee. And how about you?
I moved over here to Oklahoma City in 2008 and started going to Mid-America Christian University. It's connected to the denomination / not a denomination that I grew up in. Still planning to do ministry, and after about the first year, I really started falling in love with the psychology field and started considering more being a counselor, and ended up switching my major. Then I graduated from there with my bachelor's in 2010, and I went on to get my master's and just graduated. Oh, it's been 2 years now, and I'm working on my license.
Nice.
As a counselor.
Mine's been a bit slower. I had things happening in my life. I had to put off school for a bit, and I just finished my my undergraduate last year, and I am heading to seminary now. I am doing the thing that I hated most. I'm looking at doing the thing I hated most at one time, which was ministry. So the thing is, I grew up Baptist, and the last thing I wanted to be was a Baptist pastor. And just below the last thing I wanted to be, like, that didn't even exist on the list because there was no way I was ever going to do it, was being any sort of priest of any sort. So I actually went through a bit of a spiritual journey, and I went from this sort of fundamentalist Baptist thing, which my heart, even as a child, my heart was never really into. I really didn't like it. It was too sort of hateful towards it. I love my parents, and this isn't any sort of knock on my family or parents, but a lot of the churches that I was in, especially, had very hateful elements in it, and I just didn't like it. So I went searching, was agnostic for a little bit, not very long, but then sort of rediscovered my faith. And then, so once I rediscovered my faith, I was really wanting to look and search more and more. And I found myself being drawn to more liturgical worship, which is, the smells and bells like a Roman Catholic service. But I didn't become Roman Catholic. I actually almost became what's known as Eastern Orthodox. And we can get into that later on. But in some other episode, we'll delve more into into stuff like that. But I ended up, because of some problems I had with their beliefs, I ended up becoming Anglican. And so now I am an Anglican, and now I am fully enthusiastic about becoming a minister in the Anglican Church. So yeah,
go for you.
And I say I think we're both really happy with where our careers are leading us.
We are,
definitely. So why are we starting this podcast?
It's all about our friendship.
Yeah, well, okay. From your perspective, let's talk about our friendship, and then I'll go into it if you want afterwards.
Cool. Well, I think Adam kind of filled you guys in on his religious and spiritual journey, and I'd kind of been on my own for a while since I left the college that we'd met at. I wasn't raised in the same type of church he was. I grew up in Church of God out of Anderson, Indiana, so it's not the Pentecostal Church of God. Wasn't quite Baptist. If anybody's familiar with Church of the Nazarene or Methodist, it was very similar. But it was a movement.
It was still charismatic?
What?
It was still charismatic, though?
Some churches have kind of a more charismatic element to it, but not full on. Like, if you go to an Assemblies of God church, they're a little bit more expressive than we were. Mm-hmm. But there was kind of a lot of fluidity in some of the churches. Like, I mean, if you notice, you have some Baptist churches that are kind of less on the
charismatic or more on the charismatic.
Yes, you kind of have that spectrum there.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like that. Like, we were less focused on specific doctrines that some churches would disagree with each other over. So it was kind of an environment where anybody who claims to be a Christian or who has been born again is a Christian no matter what the denomination they come from. Not really that they claim to be. I kind of said that wrong. But however, there was kind of a duplicity within the churches and even in my family where behind closed doors it was very much, oh, they believe like that. We're not like them. So
yeah.
Kind of some similar traits of fundamentalism, but less wanting to really project that out. So
not wanting to own it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, we were talking about earlier how, like, I grew up where, I mean, to be honest, Southern Baptists were too liberal for us. I'm not kidding. Where, like, I knew people who believed that Southern Baptists were not Christians because they were too liberal. So we at least kind of, in a sense, owned that whole, well, you're going to hell thing or you're not really a Christian kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
So
anyway, I think we were both pretty much raised like with a kind of a literal interpretation of the Bible kind of perspective. That's kind of some things that we had in common with our upbringing.
Well,
What?
Depends on what you mean by literal.
Oh, Lord, we're going to get into that in the first episode.
No, we're not. I mean, 'cause I'll say this. Technically, I still hold to a literal interpretation, but that doesn't mean what most people think it means.
Oh, you're getting into Peter Owens now. I watched that video.
Well, I don't know about... Well, I love many parts of Peter Rollins. I don't know specifically what he... That's the one I showed you, right?
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
I've watched a lot of his videos since the one you showed me. I don't remember if
like
it was in that
right?
one. What?
You like him a lot, right? Peter Rollins, you like him a lot.
I do.
I appreciate him a lot. I mean, there's obviously things I disagree with him on in major ways, but there are some... He's got some really good lines. Really, really good lines. But yeah, we'll get to that.
I just really appreciate that he's trying to create more conversation between different people who think differently.
Yeah, that's the thing for me. And that's actually one of the reasons why I'm getting ahead of ourselves on the outline here. But one of the aims of the goal is to facilitate conversation rather than this sort of like, well, you're going to hell, or, well, you're, I don't know, you're going to have a boring life.
And so to fill in the gaps after we left college that we were at. No, you're good. You're good. That it made me remember that really our friendship kind of took a meandering path after a while because we both started, as he said, he started changing some of his perspectives and I started changing some of mine as well and headed in very different directions. But I don't know that we were really prepared to have constructive dialogue about it at the time, to put it nicely.
That's putting it nicely. Okay.
So, yeah.
For my part on this, okay. During that time when you were questioning and then you started leaving the faith and stuff, I was really into William Lane Craig. Now, the man is a genius. I think you would agree with that, correct?
Oh, he's incredibly smart, yeah.
Yeah, very much a genius. But, like, I was playing a gotcha thing. I wasn't caring about you, and I'll say this to my shame. I wasn't caring about you and, like, what you were going through, because you weren't doing this because I just want to do whatever I want. Like, these are deep questions. Yeah. These were deep questions you were going through. But from my perspective, because I was just learning about all this stuff, it was like, oh, I get a chance to show how stupid you are and how smart I
am. Yep, that's about it.
Which I don't need that. I can prove that any day of the week, Just kidding. No. But and so that's what it ended up being, and that's one of the problems with apologetics. I still like apologetics, especially for personal self, and we'll get into apologetics in later episodes. I mean, we say we're unprepared, but we got so many different topics for each episode that we want to do. Yeah,
we're going to cover everything.
Oh yeah,
and it's going to be huge.
Oh yes, huge. Anyway, so what happened was I was probably pushing you further away, and definitely in the sense of at least just kind of being that jerk who was just like, "Whoa, what about this?"
Yeah, it actually was really fueling my cognitive dissonance at the time, and I know that's not something that you were aware of, but yeah, it was. I think during that time there were a lot of really deep questions I'd had for a long time and hadn't even allowed myself to really ask myself much further than the first thought. And so I decided to kind of pull a Rene Descartes and clear the table and figure out what I could know from there. And there's a lot more that kind of went into a lot of this time in my life that we can get into later, and some of it's personal. I probably won't, but But really, it was both for me, it was a very awakening time and a bright time, and it was also a very depressing time and a really intensely. There was a lot of internal conflict. Whenever you go through a period where you're, not just questioning this denomination or this thing over here, but pretty much your whole perspective of the world, because I was really raised in a Christian bubble and didn't really have a concept of ways you could derive sense of morality or understanding and connecting with people outside of that bubble where everybody else was wrong. So it was just kind of like shaking the Coke bottle almost. Really, I think that's really what it was like for me. So instead of it being a slow, no, I can't say that either, because I had started questioning quite a bit years before that, but
even at the college.
At what?
Even at the college that we met at.
I would say there was a lot that I disagreed with, but they shouted it so loud and they would not allow you to disagree with them or you got kicked out. I think my coping mechanism at the time was I really internalized a lot of doubt and a lot of disbelief. And I think that was kind of the way I coped growing up as well, because it was very difficult for me to kind of have an independent thought. So, back to that time in question that we were talking about earlier. I really think a lot of that internal conflict kind of came out at that time. And so when I was having all these questions and you were saying, well, let me prove this to you and prove you wrong, I think it kind of just fueled that. So we both kind of got hurt and hurt each other through the process. And
yeah, you had a bad reaction because you were like a new atheist in many ways.
Yeah. Well, I will say that's what I was trying to kind of getting into. I'll say that a lot of my perspective was just really wanting to challenge things and not really inflict pain. Okay. And at the same time, well, here we go, because I'm a therapist. I love psychology. Okay. I think deeply about the way things happen in the mind, so I'm going to kind of perhaps talk about myself in a way that, some people don't really think about themselves sometimes. So, crazy Freudian that I can be. But,
your mom's a Freudian.
Well, she totally is. But really, after you've internalized a lot of shaming behavior, or abuse, negativity, my dad was pretty abusive. After a while of holding it in so much, what can end up happening in relationships later in life when stuff gets triggered, then you end up basically showing the other person how you were hurt. Even if it attaches, in my case, to a different belief system, I think it wasn't just you, and it wasn't, I don't want to say you were my scapegoat mostly. It was I think it was those, we also got into a couple of debate groups on Facebook where there were a bunch of fundamentalists, and I think I really tore into them harsher than anybody. And so, there's a lot of mistakes that were made along the way, but what?
Mr. Whitey.
Oh, yeah. Oh, he was a sweetheart. He really was, even though he was God hates fags and everything.
That's where your mom jokes come from Mr. Whitey.
Did it start there?
Yes.
I thought it had been going on before that.
No. Okay, so we have to segue into this now. All right, so You made the what is that Monty Python joke about your mother was a hamster?
Oh, and your father smelled of elderberries, yeah. And he really took it personally.
He took it personally, and he was like freaky, and like you could feel the hatred coming from the internet. um, he was like, "How dare you? My father died 15 years ago," and I'm like, "15 years ago?"
Yeah.
I'm like, "Okay, it's not that your father died, but 15 years ago." And so he was just like, "What?" And like, so you had to explain, "No, this is
No,
from
seriously,
Monty
this is just
Python."
yes. I meant nothing about you at all.
And so then I jumped in. I'm like, yeah, and it's like not meant to be insulting. Like I started doing it like your mom jokes toward you, and then you started doing them towards me, and then we just like that was our thing. And, like,
So that's where it
everything
started. See, I remembered the Monty Python thing, but I thought somehow we had already been doing that for a while.
No,
That's funny.
not. So that's
Yeah.
how the mom jokes happened, and then they went too far.
I'm really gonna try to refrain because we're trying to keep a certain audience
Certain level.
rate. Yes, here.
Anyway, and so we had the Dark Pit of Despair for another movie we both love.
Oh, there we go. Don't even think about trying to escape.
Yeah, we had the Dark Pit of Despair of like I think we unfriended each other and stuff, and just
Yeah, we did.
probably a good year.
I would say, about a year and a few months, yeah.
Then some tumultuous stuff happened, and then we reconnected through that. And by that year off of each other really helped us. I really believe. By that time, I'd fully gotten away from sort of the evidentialist Baptist-y type of. I was already getting away from that by the time he left. By the time we parted ways, I think I was becoming Anglican at that time when we. Do you remember?
See, I don't really remember you mentioning. I remember you had a friend in the Eastern Orthodox Church, and you were getting to know that a little bit more. But I think that's about where you were when we left off there.
Yeah, so I was there, and I was still because I was trying to argue against a lot of the stuff in like the way I do stuff is I challenge it, and if they can beat my challenges, then I'm like, oh, okay, you guys are right then. So
And well, the other thing is like my perspective started evolving really quickly, and I really best describe myself as postmodernist right now, and I know Adam thinks we're all crazy whack jobs,
no,
but that was a little prod. Just kidding. I'm more like, oh, cool. Let me hear your perspective. Okay, sweet. Let me try that on for a little bit. Oh, I don't know. Okay, cool. You go your way.
my small thing about that. My only problem with postmodernism is when they want to take the toy apart and not put it back together. That's my only problem.
See,
if
if I did that, I would be a very bad counselor.
Yeah. So you're a good postmodernist. So, but in philosophy, that's what all the postmodernism is. It's the whole
Deconstruction.
deconstruction. Yeah, it's all deconstruction.
I mean, are you referring mostly to the bachelor's level courses you've taken, or are you referring to even higher than that?
If the professors I converse with are any indication, and I'll say this, it's obviously segments of postmodernism within philosophy. I've not,
Right.
there are, so for instance, I would consider Rollins a postmodernist in many ways. But he's not just complete deconstruction. He's not. He does the deconstruction, and I think deconstruction is essential.
Well, and see, I mean, I had a professor that was pretty postmodern in a couple of my counseling classes, but I can't speak for what philosophy programs are like. But it's interesting. Like when I've tried to search most lecture courses out there, whether you're talking teaching company, that's something I can put a plug in for later. It's awesome. Or like iTunes U or things where it's been very hard for me to find any like lectures solely on postmodernism.
Okay.
I think, at least in my experience, it's a lot more in literature, especially critical analysis. It's there in some forms of counseling psychology. I mean, it probably is throughout the universities. I just haven't experienced that from the philosophy side, but
I had a very weird philosophy department. I mean, they were literally, I think every single one of them was a Marxist.
See,
and like a
I
Frankfurtian
would,
Marxist kind of
okay,
thing.
I like postmodernism and Marxism, but if that's all that I was exposed to in there, I'd be very disappointed with the quality of my education because I'd like to be
Well, I
exposed to
was.
different ideas, you know?
I mean, the only reason I have that degree is so I can go on to seminary.
Right, I get you,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's well, the one thing I was thinking when you were talking earlier is sometimes when you're learning a certain craft at a lower level, they teach you the rules, and then when you get up to the higher level, you're expected to break them and do your own
No,
thing. So I
that's
was
not what it
wondering,
was.
you
Yeah.
know, was it kind of the reverse of that? So they're doing the deconstruction at the lower level, and then let you kind of work out other stuff when you get up, you know, kind of teaching the basic of the craft. I don't know.
No, because if you're going to do that, I think you should even at least do part of the reconstruction or deconstruction, depending in that degree as well. You know what I'm saying? It should have both because you
If there's
can't
any philosophy
guarantee.
majors out there that can correct us on this,
Yeah.
well, I think we're going to end up putting comments or ways you guys can send us
Yes,
questions and stuff
definitely.
eventually, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, cool.
All right, and so we refriended and we reconnected and we both had changed immensely, and I was no longer the whole hey, look at my William Lane Craig book and blah blah blah. I was no longer that. And once again, I personally don't have much of a problem with Craig. He's amazing, brilliant, but that's just not the type of apologetics I'm into anymore. And I'm presuppositional, but not the jerky type. If you know what I mean. You know what I mean, right, Kingy?
Yes,
Okay. I'm presuppositional,
I do.
but not. We can name some people, but not like them.
Well, and I think what you're kind of more on the side of Alvin Plantinga, right? Where he considers that arguments for God's existence mean a lot more to a believer and don't really accomplish a convincing argument for a skeptic.
Yeah, and like that's what I'm realizing for me. Like these intellectual arguments are really just for my benefit because
Right.
if I'm in an emotionally low state and I'm just kind of like questioning everything, I have these from my perspective intellectually sound anchors.
Yeah,
that sort of
exactly. And
don't let me get swayed by my emotions.
I'm saying I think that's beautiful. I think whatever. If it can serve a huge purpose like that, then philosophy's done its job,
Exactly. That's what I think philosophy
yeah.
is. That's why we need to teach philosophy. Yeah, one of the problems, and we're going to talk about this later, because I just showed you that video, the non-denominational video.
Yes.
Okay.
And you had it right. That's where I was for a while. I was like,
Yeah.
no. I'm at the non-church.
Well, I was that too for a short while.
I mean, hey, it's cool. I mean, if people want to do that, I still think it's fun.
If you want to do that, it's not. In theory, I don't have a problem with it, but the direction I see a lot of that in non-denominational, and I have a lot of non-denominational friends. Oh, I sound like that guy. I have a lot of black friends, a lot of gay friends. No, I have a lot of non-denominational friends.
Oh, they're really nice people, They are some good people.
I've been to their bars at non-denominational bars.
They come and work for me on my plantation.
Oh Lord. Anyway, so I say that because I see a trend with a lot of my non-denom friends, and it's this sort of like, oh well, we don't need to worry about this theology or that theology. We just need to love Jesus. I'm like, well, you need to know what that means. You need to know who Jesus is. You need to know what it means to love Jesus. You need to know what the word love means. Like the reason okay, I can get way too much into theology. I will admit that. But like for one thing, just to say, like that's my passion. That's what really that's one of the things that really connects me to the faith is like the learning of the theology and the church history and all that fun stuff. And some people aren't into that, but that's whatever. But I think you need to know a little bit of it. If I were to go to the non-denom church and be like, well, I'm not into all this, having feelings and stuff. I'm just into the whole intellect part. Like that would be kind of an unbalanced person, right? If you're not at all into the feelings, you're the psychologist.
Yeah, I think I was about to ask a question along that line, but you answered it.
Well, then just elaborate what you're going to say with that then.
Well, because I was going to say, would you think that it's more about they're more about having an emotional connection and it's more of an intellectual thing for you, but then you kind of got into the fact that there is. Well, I mean, I don't know if you want to elaborate more now or later on that or what. That
when it comes to like the faith, at least from my perspective, and I think that I have a historic, position here. It has to be like the entirety of one's being. not just sort of mere intellectual exercise or a mere emotional experience or just a sort of, ritualistic sort of thing. It's got to be body, soul, mind, spirit, everything, you know?
From my perspective, I would call that a much more spiritual exercise than a lot of people who call themselves spiritual.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
If I can have a little bit of a soapbox moment there.
Oh, no, I agree. One of the most, and tell me what you think about this. The whole I'm spiritual, not religious. Tell me what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. I mean, the one issue with it is if I'm talking to anybody who says that, I can't assume what they mean by that.
Of course.
Because many people will say, I really don't identify with any religion on the planet. I believe in God. Or I don't believe in God, but I believe in an energy. Or I think a lot of people in the New Age gamut kind of identify that way. Or you literally have Bible-believing Christians whose views are pretty evangelical, claiming I'm spiritual, not religious. So it's really hard to know what they're meaning by it. So, I mean, I don't like to judge. I mean, there's still a lot of Jesus that I like, So I'm like, it's kind of between, if I were to believe in God, I'd say it's between them and God to work out. But if I was coming from that perspective, but honestly, I think it.
How about this? It's between them and their authority.
There we go. But honestly, I think maybe kind of the system that we have right now in our culture has kind of created a need for people to have something like going. I grew up in the church hearing so many young people are not coming back to church. They're not going to church anymore. We're losing the young people. People aren't going into ministry anymore. All of this. And there was a lot of fear that there would be a lot of mass apostasy from faith. So I'm thinking as I'm older now and I'm looking back, I think that's probably where a lot of those people ended up. Whether they do go to church or don't go to church, or they still needed some sort of sense of faith. But I mean, I'm not trying to put a broad generalization here because there's a lot of people who weren't raised Christian that also identify that way. So you can't generalize it too much. But I think maybe. A lot of the people that I've known that kind of identify more that way is just they don't really think that much about God during their life. So when you say earlier, it helps to know Jesus or what loving Jesus means or a lot of that kind of stuff. I think some of them kind of think about stuff like that, and maybe some of them don't think as much about it,
Yeah,
so.
Definitely. Well, we got to move on. We're all right. So next item on the list. Okay, why are we starting this podcast?
I thought we already did that.
Well, we kind of did, but we touched on it. So we're starting the podcast because I think it's important that we sort of show how a Christian and a... How do you want to identify?
We'll go with non-religious at this point.
Okay, non-religious. How a Christian and a non-religious person can have very serious talks that are in love, not in sort of like gotchas or hatred or anything like that. Because of our history. We
both were in strong agreement on that. I enjoy watching debates from time to time, and at the same time, I think there's just what I was feeling was a big lack of media out there that have kind dialogues between non-believers and believers on any part of the spectrum, where we're just more interested in furthering the dialogue along and seeing how it might grow from that rather than having to attack each other's perspective.
So we don't want to attack each other, and I don't think we will be, because I mean I've not attacked you and you've not attacked me on stuff for years. I would say at least as far as I can tell.
Seriously, yeah. Here and there we'll ask each other very challenging questions, and I love it when we do that.
Yeah, and that was the other spectrum.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that I've noticed is oftentimes we think as a world, as a culture, or as many cultures in the U.S., that it's either you have this like ripping each other's throats out sort of thing, or just you're singing Kumbaya, and like there's no in between. It's just sort of like, well, it's either, even the slightest pokes of like questions are just, oh, you just wanting to divide and hate, blah, blah, blah. Like, no, and we both ask each other pretty deep questions.
Yeah.
And I think that it's good for people to actually see that being done. Because, to be honest, if I can get, 5 non-religious people and 5 religious people having a dialogue with each other, that is a genuine trying to understand from the other side and trying to figure out what the differences and the agreements, I think that is much better than a sort of like, hateful dialogue and the quote Christians won.
Mm-hmm. With you on that.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I mean,
So,
and I know the people that are given the title New Atheists, even though many of them don't like it, the title. I've looked back on that decade of the 2000s, and I kind of think that it was kind of one of those taking the lid off the Coke bottle moments where the dialogue needed to get started, and it ended up getting started in a very tumultuous and militant way. Mm-hmm. But I think I'm starting to notice a lot more willingness to have conversations. And if people need to point at Dawkins and Hitchens and say, I don't want to be like that, but I'd like to talk about it. Hey, great,
Yeah. All right, let's go into the... that's sort of the aim and goal of our podcast. Let's go... We want to do a little bit of a short question and answer thing. We're going to ask each other three questions. I'll go ahead and start. Kingy, what is your favorite book?
Alice in Wonderland, definitely.
Nice. I could have guessed that. Definitely could have guessed that.
I've come back to that one time and again. I've watched nearly every film adaptation of it. I love it.
I haven't seen the new one, the sequel to the Tim Burton one.
Don't bother. Don't waste your time.
Okay, I figured. But I want to say, in addition to that book by Viktor Frankl is one of my favorite books. That's one you suggested to me a few years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Your favorite book is one I suggested to you. That's great.
No, one of my favorites. I'm not answering the question. I was just talking about, because we're talking about books.
Oh, I was trying to give myself a pat on the back there.
No, it's definitely a pat on the back, yeah. Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning.
Beautiful book.
Tearjerker. I had it on audio. It was amazing. All right, go ahead. Your question for me.
What's your favorite movie?
Okay. I've told you need to see this movie. And it might be my favorite movie of all time, Silence.
Okay, so that one is your favorite. Wow.
I cried 3 times watching it. I've seen it once in theater. You will love that movie.
I'll have to see it soon.
Knowing you will absolutely love it. I don't think it's in theater anymore.
I'll see it when it comes out.
Make sure that you have no distractions or anything, like you are able to just watch it.
I usually don't just half watch movies I haven't seen before anyway. So.
Okay. You will.
I'm a movie lover.
All right, my turn for the second question.
Well, I mean, you kind of answered your own question too. So my favorite movie, if I could say it real fast, is Mary and Max.
Never seen it.
Okay, you need to see it.
Okay. Mary and Max.
Yes, I have seen it about 10 times now, and I still cry.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a beautiful movie.
All right, let's see. Question number 2. If you weren't going into psychology, what would you want to go into? Like now, what would you want to go into?
I have a few different answers to that because it's kind of been... I've wanted to do a lot of things throughout my life and kind of sometimes you just have to pick one and maybe you can change as it goes along or add something, but...
If you say Chippendales...
That's exactly what it was. No, I think the first thing that I really, really wanted to be when I was young was an actor and a writer and a director of films. Okay. I wanted to do it all. I've just always... I love seeing the different perspectives from a story, both from the story writing end and from the performance end, and I've just always been in love with stories and different mediums for telling it. Yeah. So I'd probably be some form of writer or creator of stuff like that. I've written a lot of things, just never have really tried to push to get anything published. But yeah, definitely that.
All right, your second question for me.
Well, one thing that came up earlier, can I ask you what you hated so much about ministry?
Wait, is this your deep question?
Oh, is it not an easy one? We can switch if we need to.
No. We can do this one. You can do another one. I'll let you get a freebie. I saw how people in ministry were treated. I saw corruption, not from my dad, but from other ministers. I saw a lot of things that made me hate, in many ways, quote, organized religion. which is why I went to the whole non-to-nom thing for a while. And that's why, because I saw the stuff that was happening to my family. It was, and we'll get into that later, I guess. But it just seeing all sorts of things that were happening, corruption and just families that have way too much power in the church, that sort of thing. So now my tough question, and then you have one tough question for me. What do you find attractive about Jesus still?
That's not the question you said you were going to ask me.
It's related.
You jerk. What do I still love about Jesus? Is that it?
Yeah, if you do. I mean, I know you do, but if you do.
Right now. Okay, if you asked me this question a year or two ago, it would have been a very different answer. And if you ask me another couple of years, it'll probably also be a different answer.
Okay.
So I'll just speak with where I'm at right now. I think the thing that intrigues me the most about the character of Jesus is how many different interpretations of him there are.
Oh, okay.
I mean, if you even just start with the canonical Gospels, you have such diversity in character traits, personalities, sometimes even within one gospel. I know a lot of scholars like to say, well, this gospel paints it this way and this one just this way, but there's a lot to his character in each gospel. And then because I like reading everything that has been said about Jesus that I can, even though a lot of people don't view these as historically valid, I've loved reading the Gnostic Gospels, and I think my favorite is the Coptic Gospel of Thomas, because Jesus is said to say things or ask certain questions in there that are so really deep, and I've been thinking about them for a while and really seeing the metaphors, ways you can apply it in understanding your life. So
I want to save myself on something, because I said it's a good one. I want to let the public know that I'm not saying it's a good one as in, hey, that's a good gospel to read with scripture. Because I am going into the ministry. It's an interesting book to read. I'll say that. I want to clarify myself.
Cool.
Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. And then I've still known. I mean, I still have Christian friends. Like I said, I read up on a lot of different religious interpretations, and so when it comes to Christianity, or even what people, Christian or not Christian, say about the idea of Jesus, whether they're looking at it from a more mythical stance or more historical perspective, or just their own, what they believe their personal experience with Jesus, it's just I think, to me, and I know a lot of, I don't know if I want to get on this soapbox or not. Just suffice it to say, there's a lot of people who'd say, well, Jesus is that popular, he must be God. Well,
no.
That stuff like that doesn't work on me.
I got up.
Yeah, no, you're good. I knew you weren't going to go there, but but no, I don't think you have to be a Christian to be able to say, yeah, Jesus has been a very impactful figure for the last couple thousand years, and he has meant a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and I think that's something remarkable.
All right, so your question for me now.
My question.
Your difficult one.
Well, since you did religious, I'll do religious.
Okay.
Would you ever be able to be convinced that, maybe I'm asking it the wrong way, because I wouldn't even say it that way. What would it take for you to doubt God enough that you couldn't really believe?
That's the thing, because I mean, and we'll get into these later. I've told you some of the experiences I've had. Things that, like, it's more than just, I've had a bit of supernatural experiences, but then I've had things that were like, it was sort of me doing like almost a scientific test kind of thing. Like I've done the whole thing of like, okay, God, if you exist, then at this time next year, and just gave out a whole long list of things that, in my mind at least, were incredibly improbable, and then it happened. Like I had no control over it, kind of thing. So it would be a very difficult thing. I don't think it would be an emotional thing. It couldn't be an emotional thing, because I wouldn't. I can't see myself losing faith over sort of even a great devastation thing. I guess maybe if it were proven to me that the resurrection of Christ did not happen, then the most you could hope for is me just not caring. And like the physical resurrection, if it was like if we found the body of Jesus or something like that, Like if it was proven that Jesus did not exist, or if it was proven that he was never, or like if we had his body kind of thing, then I would just not, I wouldn't care anymore. I wouldn't have a direction religiously.
Oh, and since we're gonna be out of time really soon, maybe we could do a talk later more on maybe what the resurrection can mean to people.
Yeah, when I say resurrection, I say physical resurrection.
Because what I was thinking when you were saying that is I would like to hear more of your thoughts on that if you'd like to share that, because the one thing that always baffled me growing up was I thought it was his death that took care of everything, and I get, again, from my perspective, I get why you have a death and rebirth cycle in a lot of religions. You can't really have one without the other. However, when I was growing up, what really baffled me was like, wait, Jesus' death took care of our sins. Why are you saying he had to have risen from the dead? So I never got that part. So
I had that same question as a kid. And never and I believed well, maybe Jesus wasn't physically resurrected. As a kid, I was believing this because I was just like, well, he doesn't need to, so he died. That's it. That's all we need to care about. Like he physically, his body maybe was there still. Right. It's just weird. Anyway, so and we can talk about that later in a different episode of why for me it's so important that it's a physical resurrection, not a spiritual or sensational kind of thing.
Right.
As much as I appreciate John Dominic Crossan, I would vehemently disagree with him there. But yes. I
don't have to remember which. I think was he the one that argued that Jesus was a Roman zealot or Roman rebel or something?
No. John Dominic Crossan was the guy who started the Jesus Seminar. He's very liberal.
Him.
Yeah.
No, isn't that Robert M. Price?
Price was part of the seminar, but he's radical. He's crazy.
Okay. No, I remember now. Gotcha. Yeah. John
Dominic Crossan is a former Roman Catholic priest, left, and then became a scholar and all that stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, he's an incredibly intelligent man, but he's as liberal as you can be, except for Robert Price. He's more liberal. Actually, no, Robert Price is actually really conservative.
He's politically incredibly conservative. He gets a lot of negative flack from the community. He said it before. I've heard him on talk shows saying he gets a lot of flack for that.
He's pro-life too, isn't he?
Yes,
I think.
I think he voted for Trump too. He's got so much flack for his political views.
Right. That's all right. Oh, Lord have mercy, Trump.
Right.
Trump is our president, Kingy. What are you going to do about it besides rebel? Anyway,
I think we're just going to go have milkshakes on his lawn.
Milkshake? Okay, I guess. Whatever. So, this concludes it, and we're almost an hour. Wow, I hope people are listening still.
Thank you. I hope you guys like this. We're going to test this, see how it goes. So, hopefully our ramblings amused you.
Hopefully they'll be a lot shorter. But if not, then we'll have maybe 3 audience members throughout our entire podcast. Anyway, we're going to try to do it twice a month. Obviously our lives will get in the way and things will happen. Maybe we'll try to let you guys know about that and stuff. But we want to try to do it at least twice a month. And we'll go from there. So any concluding thoughts, Kingy?
Nope. I'm good.
Oh, okay.
You thought I was going to say something smart, didn't you? No, you've had enough for one day.
I got my Jameson right next to me. I'm about to drink it all.
There you go. Go for that.
I'm not a Baptist anymore, so I can drink. Anyway. So that's it for today. Thank you for joining us for what's the name of our podcast? It's Religious Nuts and Hellbound Sinner. We also want to give a shout out to Leander for the amazing music you're listening to right now. The song is called Church of the Unloved. Logan, one of the members, is a good friend of mine, so I hope you check them out.
Yeah. Peace.
I'm James, and
I'm Tiberius. No, I'm Chris.
Oh, Chris with an X.
FX.
Peace out.